and on air.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first panel of the afternoon session. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Charles Hendry, and I have the pleasure of chairing the Advisory Council of the Chamber, which is a group which gives us phenomenal advice in terms of our relationships with government and policy issues as well. By background, I was a Member of Parliament. I was one of Lord Barker's colleagues as Minister of Energy under the David Cameron government in the United Kingdom. And since I left politics in 2015, a lot of my focus has been on building trade links, educational links and cultural links between Russia and the United Kingdom. This afternoon's first session, the subject is infrastructure and the national projects, the highway to recovery. And this could not be a more timely and important discussion point. Right around the world, governments are looking at how they can lead the recovery out of the recession caused by COVID-19. The phrase "build back better" is happening in many countries. And what we mean by that is how do we stimulate an economic recovery that will create jobs or save jobs, that will support business, but will also lead to an improvement in the quality of life that all of us have. And that couldn't be more important in this current climate. We also know this is an issue of great importance in Russo-British relations. When President Putin met a group of British business people last year, he spoke about the opportunities in infrastructure. He said that more than $10 billion of project work each year goes to Turkish companies. And he said that the United Kingdom should be aspiring to several $billion worth of infrastructure projects in Russia. And that all comes at the same time as we're moving to address issues on climate change, and with the UK hosting the UN COP26 conference in November of next year in Glasgow, then this is going to be an ever-increasing part of our agenda. This afternoon's discussion will be moderated by Chris Weafer, who many of you will have seen leading off our forum this morning. Chris is the CEO of Macro Advisory, and he knows more about these issues than anybody else. So Chris, over to you to introduce our fantastic and expert panel.
Thank you very much, Charles. And I absolutely, first of all, have to say, I am looking forward to hearing and learning a lot more about national projects and the various aspects of it from a very expert panel that we have this afternoon. And as you say, national projects, not just, as big ticket items, but it's been very much identified by the government kind of as the core part of the strategy, not just for recovery, but very much the core part of the strategy to try and bring kind of Russia's economy forward into the next phase, to kind of bring it forward where it starts to diversify, it starts to broaden out, and it can critically start to create more sustainable growth that is less kind of volatile than we've had in the past. And the panel this afternoon, we have people who cover quite a broad part of the footprint of national projects. And so we definitely look forward to hearing more about what's happening in those individual areas. And don't forget, of course, via the chat function, everybody will have the opportunity to put in questions that we can then put to the panel during this session. So I'll introduce each speaker in turn. We start off in the same sequence as in the program that you have. And the first speaker is Olga Grichenko, Senior Vice President with Synergy Corporation. Olga is an expert in the field of investment policy, international relations, and she oversees the implementation of the company's government contracts. So very much plugged into national projects. And Synergy Corporation has been very active in this whole area of national projects with regard to small, medium enterprise development, which of course is a very big topic, as we know, in terms of developing the economy, broadening it out, SMEs. And also, hopefully, we'll talk a little bit about what's happening with education and tourism, two sectors that are of particular interest to UK companies and two big areas for UK companies in general. So Olga, can I pass to you, please?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Chris, for introduction. And I'm really honored to speak today, and especially with so expertised colleagues, and as we are really pressed for time, and I want everyone to follow with all the national projects that we have, and we have 13 of them. So I will start from the actually small brief that actually national projects have been, let's call it, designed and started before anyone could really imagine any world lockdown or quarantine. And so for now, almost all of them are being reconfigured, and I must say that actually all the government structures, public associations, funds, and business are involved in it. So if you take any working group of any national projects for today, you'll find everyone there. It is very consolidated, say. National projects are having, definite KPIs, which must be reached by 2024, and in all the strategical fields for our country. So it's including healthcare, energy, education, digitalization of economy, culture, demography, and so on. 13 in total, but it looks like we're going to have some more. For example, project for tourism, which for now turned out to be really very important, and actually it is, I believe it is the whole situation that we have in the whole world, and the lockdown leads to the necessity of developing the inside market of tourism in Russia. We now must spend some time inside country, but hopefully we'll start traveling very soon. So now to the point. I wanted to elaborate on some national projects we are involved in. So the first one is small and medium-sized businesses and support for individual entrepreneurship. The target of this project is to increase the share of small and medium business in Russian economy. So last year, Synergy Corporation has been involved into carrying out the part of this national project. And what is really peculiar in this very case that this project has started just in time. During last 2 years, the Minister of Economy has been developing the infrastructure for development of a business in Russia. So for now, in every 85 territory in Russia, we have the representative office, which is called My Business, and this is infrastructure for development the small and medium business in Russia. During last year, we have been promoting it, like for so to make everyone know that there are government support measures, and that there is consulting, there is a lot of things that government is ready to do with business. And actually we quite succeeded, because almost every second entrepreneur for today knows that there is infrastructure, there is Center My Business that can make, can consult, can provide measures of government for support of the business and so on. And when this lockdown happened, almost half of businesses knew where to go. So it was constructed just in time, and we could provide the regions with some necessary measures. But actually, what was more important is that through this infrastructure, we got the information from all the territories what measures are necessary for businesses in place. Because it is important to manage the project from Moscow. You just can't get into these peculiar businesses that is developing, being developed in different territories of Russia. And so the local working groups, including local governments and local businesses, were just involved very deeply, and through this infrastructure provided the government and working groups in Moscow with the necessary information and measures that were really in high demand by that time. And for now, this infrastructure is carrying out actually the project together, and of course they are making amendments according to the last changes of economy in Russia, but still it is the perfect example of working infrastructure for national project all around Russia that developed actually half of those measures that have been implemented by the government during the lockdown. This is first project that right now, if I'm not mistaken, and I know for sure because I'm in a working group, the government is amending this project a little bit because they actually need these amendments because of those of this current situation of economy in the country and also in the world, because it includes also exports, imports measures, and we have been discussing last year on the same forum with this project with our colleagues in Great Britain and business in Great Britain, and Russian business is also very interested to develop export-import operations with Great Britain. And right now, I believe that actually we can figure it out together, what measures can help also to provide these cooperations between our countries and between our businesses. Chris, just when I need to stop, just let me know in 1 minute.
Yeah, well, can I actually, I was just about to say 1 minute, and then we can come back and back in some of those topics.
Yeah, sure. So next project is the project education, but actually here every institution, every university, and Synergy is the biggest private university of Russia. Actually we are interacting with the ministries and the working group like on everyday basis, working out what we can do for the next several years. And you know, there is a lot of space, and what is really good here that actually universities and private organizations are working together by trying to find out the targets for what experts, what education do we need, what market need right now in these very circumstances, and we are amending it as well by providing those contemporary fields where we need most of expertise and specialists and labor. And of course my colleagues in Kirill Kaim in Skolkovo, they do develop a lot of technologies, programs and grants that really helps a lot in carrying out all the national projects, actually providing infrastructure in IT development as well, which is right now the main route for educational restructuring and bases. And just brief 2 words for tourism. Actually, it is not really yet existing project, but we hope that by the end of this year the decision will be taken to carry out this project, because it is really important. It also concerns medium and small enterprises in Russia, and we do really need a good infrastructure to develop tourism in Russia. And right now the government decided, at least we now have the independent energy for tourism in Russia, though it used to be the structure of Ministry of Economy. So I think that it will be quite logical to that we have a new national project very soon, and they also remodeling totally the program that they used to have, because actually we don't have outside tourism for now, but still we are preparing for it. And of course we are right now we are in working group for developing this national project, and I'm sure that as all the structures, all the businesses and tourism companies are involved, we'll have very soon, 1 month later, if I'm not mistaken, the project of national, the draft of national project.
Okay, that's great, Olga. Thank you, and hopefully we'll have time later to come back and ask about some of the practicalities, because obviously education and tourism, you mentioned very much kind of areas of interest for UK companies. And if we now move to kind of another big part of the national projects, which is the technology and of course digitalization, which has been one of the big spending allocations. And our next speaker, Kirill Kaim from the Skolkovo Innovations Foundation, will go through that. Kirill has a long history of entrepreneurship in Russia, working for many foreign companies in different industries, so is a very good person to actually kind of bring together how he sees, and particularly be interested in what your view is for the role and the opportunity for foreign companies also participating in the technology digitalization. And I know your background on the medical side as well. If you could bring that in, that would be great. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Chris. You know, the last part of the question is a really tricky one, but I'll touch this one as well. I'd like to talk about this, one of the national programs, which is a digital economy, one of among 13 programs, as Olga mentioned. And the president of the country put the flag of digitalization around more than even 3 years ago on one of the St. Petersburg Economical Forum. And the reasons are obvious. Russia has a very good basis for the digitalization from the scientific point of view and from the tech point of view. We have a very good level of education of the population in general. We also we are fast learners, we are fast adopters. When my more than 8 years old parents dealing with the tech and using internet, that's definitely general landscape of the country. I mean, the technology and digital technology goes forward very fast. Personally, I do not like to show the slides very much, but the digital technology national program is a kind of tricky. Sometimes, I mean, if you are not pronouncing word digital at the end of each sentence today, it actually looks outdated. That's why we have so many different programs and sub-programs and some different events. Everything is digital, digital, digital. That's why I'd like to share the slides just to explain the structure, how it looks like for the program itself. Is my screen is visible? Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's absolutely fine. The slides are up. Yes, that's fine.
Yeah. So. National Program of Digital Economy, if you look at this, it has few different parts, and these parts are split among different entities which are responsible for the different parts of the program. We have very important part, which is the digital environment regulation, because implementation of digital technology is sometimes bumped into the threshold of regulatory, and you cannot put the technology on the market because it's not allowed by the law. We have information infrastructure, which is obvious fundamental need for digital economy in the future. Human resources, as well, the core part of digital economy. We need to teach a lot of engineers, IT, software programmers, hardware architects, and so on. Information security, digital technologies in the different areas, and we will talk about this one more in details. Digital governance, state governance as a part of the national program, and artificial intelligence. Talking about the general federal product digital technologies, we are very much involved. Actually, Skolkovo as an organization, we involved in 3 parts of those national program. That's the digital environment regulation, that's digital technologies and artificial intelligence. But talking specifically about federal project of digital technologies, that includes artificial intelligence, which become a new part starting from 2021. 2019 and 22 it was at the same box. AR and VR technologies, robotics, Internet of Things, blockchain. We're not talking about the coin mining here. We're talking about the blockchains in different applications, quantum technologies, and 5G. Talking about the structure, the government took care that there are few different part of the stakeholders, different type of stakeholders involved in the national program. So we have development institutions like ourselves, like Skolkovo, like the foundation of the of Bortnik, they call it FSI, and that's for the early stage projects. We have Rosnanov and RVC for the venture stage of the project developments. We have leading companies, and that's very important. That's even from the beginning, the country took care that the biggest industrial players are involved in the agenda of the digital transformation of the economy, because they actually can formulate, they have the knowledge what's needed first and what's the most important question we need to solve. And among those big corporations, it's Rosatom, Rostec, Sberbank, Rostelecom, Russian Railways. Commercial banks are involved in the part of the program which finance in the form of loans. And in order to bring together all the experts, including tech and in the industry and economical part of the problem, the special non-commercial organization Digital Economy. It's called Digital Economy as a platform for coordination of market players, and knowledge base was created by the government. For the moment, we have the total financing of the program for the next 5 years is more than 740 billion rubles, and that's a big chunk. I mean, that's comparably big part of the federal budget overall, which the country gonna spend in this direction. And as you can see, the different ministries are responsible for the different part of the national program, as well as industrial players also split among the different part of the national program in order to bring the industrial competence in each part. Talking about digital technologies, what we are doing and what are the goals of the digital technology program, we need to create the conditions which develop the startups and early stage and mid stage tech companies in order to initiate and afterwards implement the projects. We support national innovation in IT leaders, IT companies, which actually understand the demand for this type of the solutions, and also they're generating data lakes, because I mean digital technologies cannot be created without data lakes and big data analytics. So those are industrial players. And the next goal, it's not only implement which is already known, and but also develop the perspective and the infrastructural basis for the future technologies, such as the quantum communication and quantum computing, and which is, I mean, our next future as the human being, and even more practical reasons and then the practical targets like localization for 5G technology, which has to be produced in Russia and has to be implemented in Russia afterwards. The task force Skolkovo Foundation, usually, I mean, we are very much oriented on the support of early stage startup, looking for the tech inside of the universities, bringing it on the market, helping them actually create the product. But in the part of digital economy, our part is to find later stage projects. Skolkovo is 10 years old this year, so we have already a bunch of startups in the portfolio, which later stage, which are generating the profits within Russia, outside of Russia. And for the new tech, which never be used in the certain industry, we are responsible to support the first implementation, the pilot implementation of such type of technology. Actually, we are sharing the risks of the industrial company who is ready to accept new technologies in the living body of the real business and try to use it in the practical terms next few years. That's a big risk for the companies. Actually, many big companies refuse to enter these risks, especially if you take into consideration the structure of Russian economy, which is very much centralized. The competition sometimes is not on a technology level, but on administrative level. And actually still there is some space for exponential growth extensively, not intensively. So it's maybe less competition than some other markets where intensive growth is the key question, and intensive growth is technology. So we are sharing the risk with those financial support, and we are providing up to 50% of the state financing for the big company who is ready to accept the technology for startups and to start the first test. The reason why we are doing is obvious. If we are taking this pilot project, we are always taking care that IP is owned still by the startup, not by the company where the technology is implemented. That means that the startup later on can scale up the solution and actually can make copies of the solution in other players, involving more companies in this digital transformation process with the technology which was already supported by Skolkovo and by the state. So what we are doing, we actually searching for the projects, informing all the companies that the money is here, they can get some support.
So, sorry, Kirill, can I just remind, we're in the last minute.
Yeah, sure. I'm finishing.
Thank you.
We have a very tough selection of the projects. We have scientific panel, more than 800 scientists, and that's independent people from Russia and outside of Russia. We are formulating the best practices based on implemented projects, and we are responsible in the front of the states that the project goes well and the money spent in the proper manner. So we also have some project monitoring and process. We are helping the companies to bring efforts together and to get the success. So the reasons why Skolkovo is here, we have actually really big hub for the startups and for the industrial partners oriented on the tech. There are some examples here already. Maybe I would mention at the end very two short points. We already finance, the program started very end of 2019. And we already financed few projects and already in the process of implementation with the financing about 400 million rubles this year. And right now we are bringing about 30 projects in the pipeline for the implementation of those pilot projects. And the last, which was a tricky one, the foreign companies. Why I'm saying that's tricky one, definitely that's the government make efforts to build local tech and to increase the knowledge and the competence locally. So that's why most probably the foreign company wouldn't get this type of the support. We are very much targeting on the Russian companies situated here, and we also very much targeted on the Russian developers.
Okay, thank you very much, Kirill. And actually that was a very good point you ended on, because I do hope we have time in the end to come back on two key questions which people keep asking me. One is, can it all work? I mean, describing the national projects and how much money is great, but they keep asking, will it actually work, or can Russia do it? And the second one is, can foreign companies participate, or is, the whole question of localization? So we'll come back on that, but let's now move on to our next speaker, our panelist, Robert Kirkup. Robert is the General Director for CIS with Vitol. He's been working with Vitol for 24 years. So it's good. Robert, I don't see you on screen. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, okay, there you go. Good, thanks. Sorry, just it was laid out. And it's really good because a lot of discussion about national projects has been about Russia changing, and if somebody wants to be really optimistic, say, okay, we want to use Skolkovo and digitalization and everything and become kind of a bigger version of Singapore or something. But really, the economy is still very much rooted in energy, and clearly this is the huge global competitive advantage the economy has. But it's viewed as kind of old industry and almost something like as a ball and chain, or almost for the future. But Vitol, as we know, is one of the world's biggest energy trading companies, known to be innovative and intuitive. So how are you guys looking at the energy sector in Russia? Are you seeing opportunities in kind of like the new developments in energy, renewables? Obviously LNG, of course, is part of that. But even beyond that, talk about decarbonization. There's been a lot of talk about hydrogen. There's areas. Do you see opportunities there, or sorry, let me just throw that question at you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Yes, I mean, Vitol as a private energy trading company, predominantly we were moving oil and gas molecules around the world and trying to keep markets competitive and have a clear price discovery for everyone. So we tend to have a slightly shorter sort of outlook. We're often looking 5 or 10 years ahead rather than 30 or 40 or 50 years ahead, as a lot of national projects have to look at it. But we are obviously following very carefully the move to net zero carbon targets. So I think, when you're looking at these things and look at Russia, can't look at itself in isolation as an energy market. It's a supplier to the world market, and therefore what national governments elsewhere are doing, and the EU have been very good at sort of leading the way with the sort of targets to get to net zero carbon by 2050, which was sort of came out of the Paris Accord of 2015. You've then also seen Joe Biden in the US this week, I believe, also putting 2050 in the UK. And even China have now said 2060. So I think Russia, when it's starting to look at the challenge of keeping its energy supply into the world market, it has to be looking at how does it decarbonize its energy offering to the world market. LNG is a growing export, but it's a sort of, I think we look at it as perhaps as the sort of transition energy to get to zero carbon going down the road. We also have to appreciate that there's still 2 billion people in the globe who are burning wood, cow dung, whatever, in their homes rather than actually using clean fuels. So I think we're looking at, when we're discussing this today, we're really looking at Europe, Britain, still it's Europe, but and the US and Russia, and less so perhaps China. So I think with LNG, you're looking at a growing thing. If we're looking at the projects within Russia, I think we're all aware of the Yamal and Sakhalin projects in the Far East. We're also looking at projects such as for LNG, which is the sort of, for remote communities, how do they provide energy to themselves? And one thing is LNG on trucks. And with Agreco, and I know he was a panelist earlier today, last night we were discussing how do they get funding, for these sorts of projects where it's delivering energy to smaller communities using the extensive Russian rail network. It does require government help. It does, whether that's with financing or with regulation. But those are the sort of things that we look at. I don't know if, Chris, if you got some questions you want to particularly ask me, or you want me to just...
No, it really was very much focusing on, as you say, your Vitol is trading with that kind of time frame that you developed. But are you actually seeing much happening in Russia? I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about what needs to happen, and we're all aware, for example, the European Union is now raising, well, what Russia regards as threats, of carbon taxes, which will hit a cost of goods being traded into Europe, etc. Are you actually seeing, apart from LNG and Yamal, is there anything else really happening on the ground, or is it still kind of at the scratching the head stage?
I think everybody's looking at hydrogen, and I know Charles has been heavily involved in it, and the Russian government are actively looking at this. I guess we all go back to being student days, and there's always the other side of the threat is the opportunity. So, I think we should look at what are the opportunities. And, there is the opportunity with hydrogen. It's not, obviously, clearly not a new phenomenon. We've been using hydrogen for hundreds of years. But today, 95% of hydrogen comes from brown hydrogen, which is basically produced using fossil fuels, whether it's coal or oil. There is the option to look at blue hydrogen, which would be using basically gas, obviously, which is abundant in Russia. The slight issue with that, of course, is if people are wanting to have a carbon neutral fuel, what do you do with the carbon? So there is about storage, and obviously Russia should have the ability to store carbon in the ground in its old mines and so forth. So I think that's an opportunity, and we know that Gazprom are looking very carefully at whether they can convert their gas pipelines to be able to put hydrogen in them. And we don't believe there's any reason why they shouldn't be able to do that. So the opportunity long term will be to use, to have, hydrogen put through the old system and supply Europe. So obviously the holy grail that he talks about is to have green hydrogen, which is hydrogen produced using renewable energy such as wind, solar, and so forth. I think at Vitol everybody would love to be in that position where we do have genuinely clean fuel, but we kind of feel it's it's not necessarily totally realistic
Sure.
all the time. If you look at where you are, Chris, I don't know where you are in Britain, but it's not always nice weather. So you're not always going to have solar. It's not always windy. So there is going to have to be. But the idea with green was that you'd be using renewables and then maybe storing hydrogen, which you then use later on to burn
Sure.
in your power stations. So I think we always talk about the energy mix in commodities, and I think that's probably the way we see the future, certainly for the next 30 to 50 years.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to look out the window in Moscow, but yeah, I know what you mean. The last time I was in England.
Very sunny
here. It is raining like heck today, I'm told, in the UK. So yes, absolutely. Thank you. But look at it and remind people, please, if you've got questions, particularly I know a lot of discussion on the whole question of energy and moving forward to different types of energy. Please do put your questions in the chat, and we'll have time to ask them to Robert. So next move on, as Alexander Shokin was supposed to join us. Unfortunately, he can't, but he is represented now with Vice President of RSPP, Sergei Korisnikov. Sergei, are you with us? Yeah, great, Sergei. Thank you. And I guess what we'd really, like to hear your views, the RSPP views of national projects. I know from hearing from Alexander at different presentations, obviously you guys have been very much involved in discussions about national projects and in particular how they can work in practical terms rather than just in theory. So, and you've already heard, from Kirill raising the question that foreign companies who are also looking at national projects and see this enormous big way forward and an enormous amount of money to be invested as well, again, how they can participate in it. So can I ask you just to comment on how you, RSPP, view national projects, where you see it's at, what you see happening next, please?
Thank you very much, Chris. I must say that I won't be able to completely substitute Alexander Shokin, but I would definitely try and share some sort of a position. First off, you asked to comment, and I am looking at your picture in the background, and I see a poster right behind you. I don't know, our non-Russian speaking colleagues may not know it, but it says, you can't read all of the words there.
Right.
There is a woman behind you keeping her finger at her lips and saying, "Don't gossip," she says, "don't gossip." So very briefly, yes, don't gossip. Not everything is as rosy as one could have construed from the previous speakers. This may be the effect of the Zoom or the lack of a live communication, but the picture is not so encouraging. I would definitely love to say that everything in Russia is okay, like in the UK, but it doesn't work out exactly that way because we have to face colossal challenges, and these challenges, objective challenges, the lack of enough funding, as well as lack of sufficient political will and certain wrong decision-making. And in the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs, we are of an opinion that certain decisions, recent ones, have not been well thought out in the first place. That goes for the taxation policy. You know our position. We believe that it is worthwhile to give another look at the tax innovations related to the MET, mineral extraction tax, and what the impact may be. I don't know whether how it should be translated into English, mineral extraction tax. So the proposal was to raise it 3.5 times. This is a very serious value, and the Russian companies do understand the need for such a step. But the devil is always in the details, and such details are directly, amongst other things, are linked to the way and the extent to which these or various other national projects are going to be implemented. The second point is more on a positive side of things. And here, as the Russian Union, we are very open. And let me remind you that last year we held the St. Petersburg Forum, where we held a satellite session with foreign investors, with the Russian president attending, specifically about the foreign companies' participation in the national project. Certain things have been disclosed and published. There were 40 foreign companies in that session, and so we were hoping that once the pandemic was over, we would continue. But what's interesting, that effectively, right, yes, I mean, to say that no negative views have been expressed, but there were certain nuances. But in the nuances, you always find things that are so darn interesting. And so there are questions about the taxation regimes, about the protection of capital investments and IP rights, and the raw issues related to the grandfather's clause, the raw issues about localization, and like you've made a reference to localization, and so I'd like to really make a point about it. This is something to debate, to discuss, but look at what is going on in the world. We've been always criticized that we've raised too high the bar of localization and that it really is a burden upon the foreign companies. However, the current crisis has demonstrated that there has been certain truth in what we were saying, that one should not really go the way of too big a delocalization, meaning to say that one shouldn't just keep the R&D centers or headquarters in a jurisdiction, because this is about this or that national economy being able to survive. I'm sure that the economists will always be able to come up with a good solution, inevitably the wrong one again, but this is the issue that all of the countries are facing, be it the United States, France, and Germany. They're asking themselves a question. What is the right balance between localization and globalization? What should be outsourced and what should be kept? And there is no right understanding. Against the global institutions not doing a good job about doing what they're supposed to do, and when so many mechanisms which had been created and put in place do not operate properly or are being torpedoed, or when businesses are not in a position to be involved, like the gas OPEC or the Global Steel Forum or other initiatives. This is something that we're very much and seriously concerned with. And so we are
Vasily, I'm sorry
looking
to
at the problem
interrupt
in a
you,
broader way.
Can I just say we have just 1 minute, please? The next.
All right. So in this sense, we hail our national projects so as to try and cast a more broader look at the problem. And this is not just our national projects. These are the national projects which are being run by our international companies with your participation, and we do need your support and your assistance, amongst other things, to develop more effective global mechanisms for regulation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Vasily. Okay, so we move on to our next presentation, which is from Vasily Sidorov, Independent Director of Russia Post. So we're moving kind of into a different area now, I guess, of national projects, kind of more infrastructure. Vasily also has a history, Independent Director of Russian Railways. So Vasily, if you can give us your perspective, and we'd also be very interested in hearing what's happening with Russia Post. There's always, I guess, a discussion and interest around Russia Post. It's this enormous company what it might be going to do in the future and how it might appear and how it might develop itself. So I'd definitely be interested in hearing that within the context of national projects, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to address this honorable gathering. Russia Post is a pretty unique story, actually. I've seen probably 3 or 4 companies of that scale going through the stage of conversion from a state-owned, wholly state-owned institution to a private company, though sometimes, in some cases, 100% controlled by the state, but still converging over to a kind of a joint stock company with corporate governance and all the elements of a best practices of a proper market player. So this was probably the last big chunk to be privatized, quote unquote. It's not yet sold by the government, but it's been to a joint stock company at the end of last year. So and the scale is pretty amazing. It's a company that has 42,000 branches across the country. In some cases, is the only network present in a particular location. It's the second largest employer in the country with 330,000 employees, right behind Russian Railways. And obviously, you know, all the numbers, it's obviously the main provider of services, of postal services in the country, and long distance, basically long haul backbone logistical and postal services for both individuals and corporate clients. Now, the challenges, first of all, you know, it's an interesting story because it will go through the normal evolution of a major network becoming a real player. And obviously with that come all the usual challenges. You have to be, on the one hand, maintaining your status as a kind of a social institution and executing all the social duties that are entrusted in you as a company, with playing the market game and not basically giving up on those elements of the market that are highest value creating, and at the same time they're most competitive. And obviously in e-commerce and logistics that serve e-commerce, and in sort of the broader marketplace and ecosystem area, is that there's been a real evolution of definitions of who the players are, who the competition is, or who the clients are. Because with people like, or companies like Wildberries and Ozon creating their own logistical capabilities and infrastructure, they become competitors of Russia Post. At the same time, they're major client of the company. You have Sberbank announcing its logistical ambitions as part of their ecosystem. Obviously, Sberbank is also a client, but may become a competitor if you fully trust in their announcements, their recent announcements. And the whole definition of where Russia Post competes and who it competes with has already changed and is changing now and will be changing in the future. And obviously that, you know, the market is getting crystallized in terms of who the partner groups are going to be, what the main ecosystems are going to be, and who the main technological players are going to be in the space. We believe that Russia Post, with its base assets and its base competitive position, has a fairly high chance of continuing to be a major player. And obviously, you know, I've seen Aeroflot, I've heard of Aeroflot for 7 years. I've seen Aeroflot emerge from a rather Soviet-style bad service carrier to a proper international player, winner of major international nominations in service and business class and economy class. And this evolution takes time. And obviously, it'll be exciting for, you know, for all of us as customers, as well as within the company, to see how this evolution takes place, how fast, and what challenges need to be overcome. They will be overcome eventually. Because there's no way around it. Because the company will be a proper market player. And obviously, I mean,
Vasily, I'm really sorry. We're really tight on time. If I can.
No problem.
Okay, thank you. I would love to talk so much longer about this because I think it's just a fascinating topic and hope we get another opportunity again. But we need to move on to our last speaker who's been sitting waiting patiently, Johan van der Plas, who is the Senior Vice President for Russia at CIS with Schneider Electric, which is one of the world's biggest providers in the power, energy and automation sector. So very much kind of infrastructure, very much kind of national projects. Johan, let me pass to you.
Thank you, Chris. I know very little time is left. So first of all, I really like the title, "Never Waste a Good Crisis." I think this says a lot about that, and in many directions we can talk and linked about that. When you talk about my sector, the thing that also comes to mind immediately is digitization, without any doubt. When you talk about modernization of energy infrastructure, it's all about that. I listen carefully to Kirill, I listen carefully to Sergey. I agree with both of them. But in my view, Kirill was a little bit very short at the end when he said for foreign companies, it is a bit tricky. I think it's bloody tricky. It's very tricky to be engaged nowadays in digitization in Russia. Digitization, because of COVID, took off everywhere in the world. We talk about remote asset control, digital twins, automation, smart factories, you name it. Russia is in that respect no different. Agree with Kirill that the basics are here. It's a very digital savvy country, education, important players, Yandex, Sber, rebranded nowadays, already digital factories like Sibur, e-government, Moscow, an example of e-government compared to many other places. It's all there. In a good position to further digitize. But what I'm afraid of is that, once again, and we don't really talk about that, but geopolitics are derailing a lot of the good news. In what respect? You mentioned Made in Russia. Made in Russia is nothing new. And I think it's absolutely honorable for any government to stimulate local production, to push for import substitution. There's nothing wrong. Every government in the world is doing that. In Russia, for a long time, it was based on hardware. Hardware import substitution is rather easy if the business case is there. And by the way, to avoid forex exposure for many foreign companies, it makes a lot of sense to produce locally in Russia by far, and also even export it out of Russia. The tricky thing is the software. Localizing software for a foreign company, it is far from being easy, especially if now the regulatory is imposing restrictions saying the IPR's software source code has to be owned by a truly foreign entity, more than 51%. So a foreign subsidiary of a foreign company who is producing here a software would not even apply to that criteria. And in that respect, there are simple software applications which are needed for digitization that foreign companies can localize based on another release, even certain complex ones. But there's a lot of truly important, newest digital technology that is available worldwide that for many reasons cannot be localized, because you talk about millions of software codes which needs to be rewritten, etc., etc. And let me pick the example of critical infrastructure, and then you can look into what might happen next. Telecommunication. Yeah? I saw on Kirill's slide the word 5G. I know the government would love to have an own Russian 5G solution made in Russia, owned by a Russian entity. Even the Americans, they don't have it. I mean, yes, Microsoft is trying, Google is trying, but the reality is that 5G today is owned by either Nokia, Ericsson, I oversimplify a bit, the West, or Huawei, the East. So what I'm starting to fear is that from the Russian point of view, if they realize that it's not possible to have a true local alternative for a complex thing which is critical to digitize, either they will not do it and they will lag behind digitization, or they will go to the East. Because quite frankly, let's not be naive. If they're using in their telecommunication network a Nokia or Ericsson, it can be bugged without any problem. The same is true for Huawei. and the Chinese might even use the bugs to try to extract some economical data. But from the Russian perspective, the big difference is that while the Chinese will never try to impose sanctions on technology for forcing regime change, they're no longer sure about doing that from Western technology, which basically means it fits in a breakdown of the supply chain globally, worldwide, in two blocks. You will have more and more Western technology for the Western part of the world, Eastern Belt and Road technology for the other part of the world. Question is, where is Russia going to belong economically? Is it going to align itself to the West or to the East? And I'm afraid that clever politicians which are thinking, let's impose the sanctions, etc., have provoked some unintended consequences, which is having an implication on global companies. Now, global companies, many of them we are rethinking ourselves our global supply chain. Again, we try to localize as much as we can in Russia, but we are indeed also trying to see, in order to stay relevant all across the world, to have a dual supply chain. Because, pick the other example, I know that RBCC is UK organized, but okay, Huawei is no longer allowed to sell its equipment to the UK or to Western Europe. But I used to work for a company called Alcatel, today Nokia. I remember that the largest market of that company used to be China. Today they're selling almost nothing anymore in China. So there again you see what I was talking about, a complete disruption that we are having. And to come to the conclusion, because I have 30 seconds less, I think first of all, my message is to the politicians, basically, don't use sanctions on technology or on business for political reasons, because it's provoking the changes that then afterwards can no longer be controlled, and we also, European companies, we will pay the bill. Start with some re-engagement between the Western Europe. I think climate change, just like COVID does not have any boundaries, also climate change does not have any boundaries. All kind of technologies related to that we can do. To the companies, push more for open software and open source software, and don't be naive. The world has changed, and I think it's a new reality with which clever companies will have to live with. Thank you for my five minutes.
Thank you very much, Johan, and I like that quick summary. We do have a couple of minutes left. We've grabbed it from a bit of space in the middle, and we need the last 1 minute for Charles to end up. But if I can ask a very general, simple question of everybody in 30 seconds. Kirill, are you optimistic that national projects will eventually move forward and will start to make a difference, or not? Sure. Okay, thank you. Olga, can I ask you the same question? You've been very close to all of this and working with government people and government agencies. Are you optimistic? What are you expecting? Can you hear me? Oh, yeah.
I'm perfectly optimistic here, Chris. They are really networking. I know actually everyone around in the digital sphere, and Kirill, I know him, though we have never met before. So we are just interacting on different Zooms and Skypes. We are participating in grants, and business is really very involved in it. And when business is consulting government, it is most stable structure because business know how to work, and in cases when the business is ready to work, and government is listening right now and taking the expertise and all the successful cases as well.
Sure.
So I believe all these national projects, especially digitalization, because actually all the education is based on it right now, and almost all the industries are based on digitalization right now. So
Okay.
I'm sure they will develop all of them.
Okay, Vasily, thank you, Olga. Vasily, you work within a big, as you said, second biggest employer. You know, we talk about bureaucracy, etc. How do you see it? You already did say you were optimistic that Russia Post would change, etc. Are you seeing that, or is that kind of more based on hope that it has to, or you're actually seeing it happening?
Well, listen, I'm not a great believer in the efficiency and efficacy of the state as a manager of business and a manager of proper interest, generally speaking. But I do believe that given the current circumstances, we are where we are. Okay, so we're not going to change. This is not going to change overnight. With some level of balance and marriage between government support and business initiative and freedom of action, things can be done and things will be moving forward.
Sure.
Inevitably.
Okay, thank you. Robert, 30 seconds. You guys looking forward? So I know you're very much trader and therefore you, whatever happens in the market, you're very adaptable, but still in terms of what you see in the sector, you do see prospects for change.
The energy market's a global market, so I think we all get pulled along. And I think there is a general willingness throughout the world to try and become more carbon neutral.
Sure.
I think, Russia is such a big part of its economy, it will follow that road.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then finally, just pass to Charles to wrap up. And thank you everybody for participating. I'm sorry we really were so tight in time. We could spend 10 hours talking about this topic and hope we will have an opportunity again. So thank you for the audience. Charles, I'll leave it to you for the last word.
Chris, thank you. Thank you to you for moderating your discussion. I think what we've seen is a very broad, wide-ranging discussion, which just shows how many different aspects to the infrastructure debate there are. I think from a Chamber's perspective, what it brings home to us is how many opportunities there are therefore for Chamber members. This is an area which we need to continue to keep a very close eye on. We need to identify where those opportunities are, and we need to make sure that our members fully understand how they can best take advantage of them. To all of our panelists, thank you so much. A really wonderful tour d'horizon, a great opportunity to hear your different perspectives, and it just brings home to us how immense the challenges are and how great the opportunities are. Your last question, Chris, are we optimists? Yes, of course we're optimists. It's always better in life to be an optimist because then you're thinking about what's possible. The pessimists are always focusing on why it's not possible. So always be an optimist.
Thank you, Charles. Okay, so I guess we pass back to the coordinators, to Alf.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.